Hey there YouTube, welcome back to another Black Pwder update. And as you can see, I've finished my regiment of Hussars. These guys took me a fair amount of time, even though it's only really been around about just over a week. I've been putting in some mammoth painting sessions on these guys, probably averaging about 6 hours a day. So they have taken me quite a long time to do, even though it's actually only just over a week in reality. These guys, of course, are Perrys. I've never really been that fussed about getting Hussars, just because they're so fiddly with their pelisses and stuff. But when I found out, I was basically watching one of I think it's Railway Matt's videos a fair while ago now, but he basically picked up a box of these same Perry's Hussars, and while he was looking at the sheet, he saw that there was a number of Hanoverian units on there. One of which was this one, which are the Duke of Cumberland's Hussars, and they're quite an interesting unit. I've been sort of looking up their sort of details, and also if you happen to be lucky enough to own the Waterloo Companion, I'll actually direct you to the page that actually talks about them. Basically, the regiment was set up composing of all Hanoverian gentlemen of high social standing and wealth, but with all no to little military experience, and they even supplied their own equipment and their own horses. So these guys are basically complete aristocracy. They're in it to show off, to get the to show off in their Hussars uniforms, to show off to the ladies, to get even more social status than they had before they even joined. And the interesting thing about this particular regiment was that during the actual Battle of Waterloo, they actually turned tail and fled, even though ordered to attack. Now let me show you, if you happen to have the Waterloo Companion, page 223, there's actually two sections. There's the flight of the Cumberland Hussars, which I'll actually just I'll zap up here and you can pause it, because it's quite an interesting story. But basically these guys were ordered to attack, and they turned round and fled towards Brussels, and basically never stopped, which I find not only quite humorous and also quite terrible at the same time, because obviously these guys were complete yellow bellies. But the fact that they didn't stop until they actually reached Brussels, I found quite humorous. But the reason why I decided to do these guys is that I thought it would be interesting to be able to take control of them on the battlefield, and perhaps turn the tide, and give these guys a little bit of courage, and sort of start improving their credibility a bit via the tabletop. So let's go in a little bit closer and I'll show you some more of these guys. So let's just move the camera a little bit, 'cause it's a little bit crooked. There we go. It's not the best of days here. It's dark and rainy. I'm in my usual place. I'm actually just going to take the video off the video camera off the tripod for a second and spin it around. You can see that my cat has decided to go to sleep in one of these little cubby holes. I had to basically clear it of all the miniatures that were in there, and she's now decided to sleep there. And of course this is the cabinet where I keep my my French, which are on these two shelves here, and up above is where I keep all my British. So as you can see, I've still got plenty of room for adding more units. I'm not going to be out of room yet. So there's that little bit of interesting information there. we'll get back to showing you these guys, because like I say, they took me a fair amount of time. We all know that I'm not the greatest fan of cavalry, but I have been, as you know, on this massive morale boosting painting run lately, and to tell you the truth, I actually really enjoyed doing these guys. In fact, I actually enjoyed doing the horses more than I enjoyed doing the guys. I basically stuck them all together, had them all separate on milk bottle tops. I left the actual troops all on their sprues, and I basically base coated every single horse, basically with as easy as I could do it. Basically, well, obviously I undercoated them. Actually, I undercoated them all by brush this time, instead of using a run out of grey primer, and I probably wouldn't have had enough white primer left to actually do the whole lot of them, so I decided to just do it by brush. I've basically got the biggest brush that I've got out of my collection, and slapped on some white primer onto everything, and then I base coated all the horses at once. Of course, being a British sort of cavalry unit, I decided to go for the classic sort of browns and chestnuts, because obviously British cavalry preferred those two breeds of horses. But I did put in some sort of some different types of markings and stuff like that, just to show that they weren't army procured. They're basically you know, private horses. So we've got a lot more sort of, you know, white socks and head markings and stuff like that, a lot more than you'd normally find in a sort of a regulation cavalry unit. So let's zoom in a little bit and I'll give you a closer look at these guys. So yeah, I basically painted up the horses, and then I was doing the guys in, I think I did a group of 4, and then a group of 5. So what's that? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then a final group of 3 to finish off. And of that last 3 were the officer and the trumpeter. So let's grab the very rear unit here and bring it in. So here we have the Cumberland, or Duke of Cumberland Hussars, and you can see it's actually quite a simple uniform. I always find that when I start a new project that I've never done before, I basically painted them on the sprue as well for a large part. I base coated them on the sprue, and cut them off, and then did them by hand. But I actually left the sabres off and the jackets off, and I even left the heads off and the arms as well until almost the very end. So you could say that I painted them all separately, in each separate bit, and I found it a lot easier, especially for these guys, all their sort of intricate detail and stuff. I basically do what I normally do with stuff. I experiment and find different ways of laying down different colours and coming up with the best way that works in the end. And I think I found quite an efficient way of doing them in the end. You can see that the colours are mainly green, with yellow, with red and yellow facings, and gold on the jackets, and yellow on their shakos, and of course yellow striped down the leg. And what we've got here, I think there's a couple of bay horses here. I actually put a few more steps into the horses this time as well than I normally do. I normally do sort of a 3 or 4 sort of stage horse, but these are more sort of a 5 or 6 stage. So I was pretty impressed with how the horses came out this time. I certainly put a lot of time in on them. So that's the first unit. Go for this unit next. So I think they look quite striking. I mean, I suppose you could sort of say, well, it's like another green unit. And I have been painting a fair few green units lately, admittedly, especially with the last two Hanoverian units I did. But yeah, here we have a bay and a chestnut, and of course the chestnut has got some a few markings. It's got a white sock, a bit of head marking. I was very pleased with how these guys came out, actually. It's one of those. As I was painting them, I always call it the scrappy stage, when you first put the sort of base colours on, and you sort of find that, because I always paint, I always put a base colour underneath for their white strapping and stuff. I always paint bone as a sort of like a sort of a base colour for the white, and it always looks like really scrappy and ugly. And it's not until you've done you've sort of gone back over the white and then sort of painted in the yellow parts that it starts to begin to look tidy. So you kind of have to sort of almost sort of put up with painting something that looks really ugly for sort of a good, I don't know, couple of hours probably, if by the time you've done like 3 or 4 of them, and then you know, put on all the base colours and stuff. So you can see that they've got their, for their pelisses, they've got green with black fur around the edges and gold buttons and lace, and then on the actual uniforms they've got all sort of yellow lacing and stuff. So that's the, what's that, the third stand. And also another thing I did was I decided to trim the moustaches off of a few guys. I know that Hussars are quite known for their sort of posh moustaches, but I decided to zap in a few guys that perhaps were on the younger side and haven't you know, actually haven't grown moustaches. So here we actually have 2 guys. Again, when I was basing these guys, I kind of mixed them all up, so they're all kind of random. And you can see just by fluke, 2 guys without moustaches ended up on this one stand. So here we have a couple of chestnut horses, one with some slight markings, and the other one pure chestnut. Gets him. Of course, this stand is my second command stand if I split them into 2 units of 3, and you can tell by the markings on the horse. So let's go for this side unit here. So getting towards the end of these guys now. So here we have, it looks like a couple of, no, we have a bay and a chestnut. The bay's got a bit of white marking. The chestnut's all pure. Again, similar, obviously the guys are pretty similar. I've got to say that although I enjoy painting these guys, I probably wouldn't be buying any more Hussars for quite a long time. I found them enjoyable to paint, but not that enjoyable to the point where I'd go out and buy 3 or 4 boxes and decide to paint them up. I think you know, cavalry, no matter how much you enjoy painting them, as far as I'm concerned, you know, 1 unit at a time is certainly good enough. I don't think I could sit and do 3 or 4 units of cavalry like I did the 4 battalions of French infantry. I certainly couldn't, and definitely not Hussars. You can also see that they've got red lining on the insides of their pelisses as well. So that's the other side company. And then finally the officer and the trumpeter, or the bugler. And he decided to go with a sort of a light grey horse for him this time. I kind of like changing it up. Sometimes they have very, very light grey, almost white. Sometimes I go for a bit darker. This time I decided to go for a sort of a light grey. No markings, just a little bit of head marking just on the sort of middle of his head. And the officer's horse, he's on a chestnut with a couple of white socks and a white nose, and it goes up his head and even goes onto his ear. You can see the officer has got some posh horse bridle and strapping, where most of the troops have got this nice sort of well, I think the colour is actually cavalry brown, but it's kind of like a really nice dark red leather. And you can see the officer has got gold in place of a lot of the yellow lacing and facings that the troopers have got. The officer has got them in gold, and that's the only real bit of yellow strapping that he's actually got. Everything else is gold, and he's got a is for the officer's belt. Well, not his belt, his sort of waist belt. There was like 3 or 4 different, well, 3 I think, actually 3 different variations. The ones on the Perry's booklet, let me just grab that and show you actually. Just go out of focus for a second. Where did I put it? Down here with the Waterloo Companion. So, I'll just find it, hold on. Oh, here it is. Yeah, here we go. So this is the Parry's slip here, and there you can see the Duke of Cumberland Hussars. Now this one has got, for officers' belts, these 2 options here. So basically one of which is almost identical to the troopers, apart from a gold lacing, I think. Although, I don't know actually, it could be, no, yeah, I think it's gold lacing actually. But from the French website that I use, they had their officer's belt in yellow, as in like almost as in the same sort of yellow as an infantry officer's sash. So I decided to go with that colour because I thought it kind of sort of uniformed along with the rest of the sort of Hanoverians, and I think it was a good choice in the end. But instead of using the brighter yellow that I went over the yellow lacing with, I actually left it as yellow ochre, so it's just like a slightly, I suppose it's more golden but not quite so bright. And you can also see that the officer has a rimless shako on as well. So that is the end of this particular unit, and just for information wise, as usual, I put the information on the bottom there. So these guys are called the Duke of Cumberland Hussars, and there's their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Hake, and they come from the Hanoverian Cavalry Brigade, and a worthy addition to the British, who now have 2 units of cavalry, which is probably definitely needed because the French have got 2 and have got 1 coming. So that is those guys. Now, what am I going to do next, you may ask? Well, let me show you. I am still waiting for my Chasseurs de Cheval to come up, or to come in rather. Again, I ordered them from Wayland, and this time they do seem to be taking a little bit longer to come in than my last 2 or 3 Wayland orders. I'm hoping that they'll come sort of Friday-ish, Thursday, Friday. I should hear from them to say hopefully that they'll that they've had them in and they've been sent. So basically, I was kind of I was thinking about what to do next. Now, like I mentioned in my French video, I've had a odd 12-pounder sitting around from Victrix. Here is in fact, still in the bag. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and I'm going to go and buy a 12-pounder, and I'm going to make my French another battery of 12-pounders. Now, you'd think that would be quite easy. You know, you literally just go to a site, get a 12-pounder, like from Perry's or from Warlord. But do you reckon I could find a 12-pounder that didn't have a guard crew? No. Basically, the only places I found them were basically from separate, you know, buying a separate gun and separate crew. I went to Front Rank, looked at their sort of availability of figures, and yeah, the gun looked pretty good. It was about sort of £6.50, I think it was. But the crew, they only had like for late crew, they only had like 5. And to tell the truth, I really didn't like their poses. So I went hunting again, and I ended up going to Foundry. So in the end, I ended up getting a cannon and crew from Foundry, and here they are. So I'll quickly give you a quick look at these. So this is the gun. This was, I think it was £5 something, so it's slightly cheaper than Front Rank. And you basically get the gun and the wheels and the ammo box here, and I'm not 100% sure what this is. I don't know if any of you out there know what this is, but I couldn't identify it. I even looked in my French artillery book and I couldn't find anything on their diagram of a cannon that resembled this. So I don't know if anyone knows what that particular part is. But it looks like it's definitely got sort of a wooden texture, and it's got some sort of connection point there. So if anyone knows, slap it down in the comments, because I can't identify it. So that is the Foundry cannon. I was pretty impressed with it. Like I say, it was £5 something. It's not particularly got much flash on it or anything, which is really good. So quite a nice model there. Now the crew, I also ordered crew from Foundry because they did have their pack of late crew was actually quite good looking. Because I kind of really wanted a cannon to be in sort of ready to fire sort of position. And the Front Rank guys were kind of loading. But the cool thing about this particular pack is not only are they late artillery crew, but you also get this really nice little powder keg and some balls, cannonballs, and you also get some tools. You get some extra sponges and a bucket, which is really cool. And then the figures themselves, they have got a little bit more flash on them. I have removed some of the bigger bits that are around their stands, but you can still see there's a few little bits of nubs and stuff still on them because I haven't properly cleaned them yet. But here we have a nice guy with a sponge. Again, sort of like basically the position is ready to fire, which is exactly what I wanted. We've got the officer. Sort of, that's not the officer actually. That's one of the gunners. So he's probably the number one who aims the cannon. Here's the officer. So a nice officer, ready to give the order to the number one to fire. Of course, the match guy, ready to go. You can see late artillery crew for artillery, and here we have one of the This is probably like number 5 or something. The one who does all the pricking covering the hole and pricking the powder bag and putting the primer in. And finally we have one of the gunners that assist in moving the cannon from the side, and I believe he also assists one of the other chaps, possibly one of the spongers. So a nice crew of cannon there. So that's my next project, and I'm hoping that when I finish these guys, my chasseurs de cheval will come, so I'll start doing those. So that's the end of this video. What are we looking at? 25 minutes, so it's probably about the average length of one of my videos. Sorry about waffling on a little bit. Thank you again. I've had a whole bunch of new subscribers this month, so thank you to those guys. I hope you enjoy the content. Once again, I've had probably about 5 or 6 subscribers that haven't come up in sort of the notifications that you normally get when you get new subscribers, which is strange. And what else? I've been watching all your videos, commenting when I can, and that's about it really. So until next time, I will catch you all later. Goodbye.